You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 6, Episode 7. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey friend, and welcome to Feathers this week. I am so glad that you took the time to hang out with us for a little bit. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you one last time that we are starting the spring Bible study of Rich, Discovering God's Abundance in and through your life. And we go through the chapter, John 15, where Jesus says he is the true vine and we are the branches, and if we abide in him and he in us, then we will bear much fruit. And it has been revolutionary in my life just to study those words of Jesus, and would love to have you join us. If you want to get signed up, it's abidingministries.net/OBS to get signed up, and from there we'll send you the Facebook group so that you can join us there. All right, so let's get to today's episode with Jill Anderson. Jill and I go way back, probably, 8 or 10 years, both bloggers way back in the day, and neither one of us are really blogging on our personal blogs at the moment, but we became friends on Facebook, and over the last few years have watched as her family have fostered a child, and then how she has gotten involved with sponsoring a refugee family. And it has been so fun to watch her insights that she shares and just her excitement around that, and really just the education that I've had from, just watching that from her experience. And I just wanted to bring her on today and let you hear firsthand how she got involved and what sponsoring a family is like, and then maybe hear how you can get involved too. So let's go ahead and get started. Here is my conversation with Jill. Well, hey, Jill, and welcome to Feathers today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to actually get to talk to you instead of just on the online world.
Yes.
So why don't we start out, you introduce yourself, your family, and what you do.
Yep. So my name is Jill Anderson. I'm a former blogger. That's how we met, actually. But I haven't blogged for a couple years. But because of that, I have been in social media for a long time. So I currently work part-time at my church, Ada Bible Church, doing all their social media. But my main role is a wife and a mom. So I've been married 15 years to my husband, Ryan. And I have 3 kids, 13, 9, and 7. 2 girls and a boy.
My goodness. So I'm just thinking, we've been connected for quite some time online now. How long do you think that it's been? I couldn't remember how we even got connected.
I don't know, but I think we've only met in person one time, which is crazy because I feel like I've known you for a long time. But it's probably been 6 or 7 years that we've been connected in the online world.
It has to be. I was thinking somewhere in the 2007-8 range.
Yep.
Through Amanda, right? Or Mary?
One of them, probably.
Oh, Amanda.com, MaryCarver.com.
Yep.
We're all from the original blogging world.
Exactly. It's a small online world.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you because as we've been connected all of these years, we've been Facebook friends, and in the past few years, it's been fun to watch you get involved in sponsoring a refugee family. And with all of the talk about refugees over really, I guess what it's been the last year at least, I wanted you to share your personal kind of interest in work with them, and just to give a different perspective, because I think this is my theory just going in, that there's a lot of fears and anxiety, and there really don't need to be in a lot of cases. So let's back up a bit in your story, and you kind of tell me how all this started for you.
Yeah, so I'm going to start back before the refugee thing kind of got laid on my heart, because it really started probably about 5 years ago, just kind of feeling discontent with the version of Christianity that I had been a part of for a long time. And by that, I just mean kind of feeling like a strong Christian, being a strong Christian, but still having this emptiness when it came to pursuing the American kind of way of life still wanting the bigger house and the more cars and the more stuff. And even if it wasn't at the forefront of my life, it was still leaving me feeling really empty. And so really feeling like God was saying, I was raised very much with the belief that to whom much is given, much is expected. I was raised in a family of people who give and serve, but needed to really make that real in my family, watching my kids grow up more and more entitled, and just all of that kind of came to a head. And so I started to wonder what it looked like for our family to fight against that a little bit, which is, I'm sure, as you know, like a hourly battle. But I got really moved towards foster care. And so we kind of jumped into that. My husband, far more unwilling, but willing to support me in it. And we did that for a year and a half. And it was insanely hard and insanely wonderful. And God just taught us a lot through that. But at the end, we were kind of left really burnt out and exhausted. And so, but I still felt this need to do something that brought me outside my comfort zone and served a population that kind of God would have us pay attention to, that is sometimes overlooked. And about that time, it was the first kind of round of the Syrian refugee crisis getting brought to the national attention. And it just wouldn't leave my mind. And it was something so far out of my comfort zone. And that's when you know it's from God, is when it's like, I would not come up with this on my own. So at that time, there was a group of moms who had started an after school service team at our school. My kids go to a Christian school, but we really wanted, again, to expose our kids to more service and get them out of their bubble. And so we had been meeting, and we had kind of said, hey, this refugee crisis is all over the news. What could we do? And so as we were looking into it and kind of meeting with some people about it, that was kind of the first round of it becoming very political. And I remember our governor and many governors around the country shut down, blocked refugees from coming, and it became really hot politically. And so our school was kind of like, yeah, we don't really want to touch this, and we didn't know what to do, and we weren't really organized at that point. And so it kind of got put on the back burner. But for probably about 9 months, there was just 4 of us moms who kept saying to each other, like, we're still feeling like we're supposed to do something with this, but we don't know what it looks like and, what we can do. And so finally, we all just said, what would it look like for us to sponsor a refugee family, just the 4 of us? So a lot of times, refugee families are sponsored by more of like a big organization, like a church or something. But we were like, maybe we can just do this individually, and certainly anyone can, but we had not ever had experience with it. So we kind of just went all in and started some of the training. And like what happened with foster care, once you kind of raise your hand and say you're in, they call you like a week later, right? Because there's such a need, and they're like, yes, we have for you. So this was last summer. We kind of all got our ducks in a row, and the 4 of us were completely in. And we went to the school again and kind of asked them for backing, and they were real hesitant because, again, it was ratcheted up politically again. But they gave us some minor support, enough support that we felt like we could go forward, because our organization that we work with requires you to have some sort of sponsoring organization. So they agreed to be that for us. But 4 of us really knew that we were signing up for both of it. And we got a call like a week later with 3 families that were coming in, all of them from the DR Congo. And they kind of said, are you ready? Will you take any of these? And so just like that, we were on our way.
Okay, so I have to ask, before this and kind of when it was brought to the table, did you have fear or anxiety about getting involved?
Yeah, not from the perspective of are the people that we get going to be safe? I don't think I worried about that. In the training, I know there's a lot of stuff that's out there in the world of people talking about refugees, about vetting and how, we need to vet them more. When you go through training, you really learn how insanely difficult it is to get over to America. It's a really strenuous process. It takes years of background checks. Very few people get selected. It's like a tiny sliver of the amount of refugees in the world get chosen. And then they get randomly placed. So actually our refugee family has family members who are in London, some in Missouri. Like you don't necessarily get to say, I want to come to America and I want to live in Michigan. It's all very random. And so my fears were about that part were immediately put to rest just by going through the training. We were asked very explicitly if we wanted to request a Christian family, if we wanted to make sure that the family we got wasn't Muslim. We didn't choose to. We kind of prayed about it and all said, hey, we're up for whatever God gives us. Our family happens to be Christian, which is actually really awesome because we get to have the shared faith with them. They're very strong Christians. And so that gives us a really cool place to start. I have some friends who are sponsoring a Syrian family. And while it's been a great experience for them, there is that disconnect because there's a lot of religious and cultural things that make things more challenging for them to connect with. But we chose not to put any restrictions on who we got. When we found out that there was these 3 different families that we could choose from the DR Congo, we picked our family solely based on the fact that they had kids most closely resembling the 4 of our families' kids in age. So we just felt like our kids would connect better with the situation if they at least felt like they had that in common.
Okay, so that's it. That's very interesting, and I love that you guys have this organization. Can you tell your organization name?
Yeah. We work with Bethany's. I honestly can't remember how we got connected with them. I think when we first started thinking about Refugee, we just started Googling basically, and found organizations, and then, you just get kind of led to the one that you're supposed to be, with. I think there are other organizations in Grand Rapids that do refugee care, but it's probably the biggest one here. So it was just easy to find them.
Okay. So as you're doing this, what does it look like? What does it mean to sponsor a family? Is this like compassion sponsorship? Like you're just paying a monthly fee? Is this something where you're like, what are you doing? Explain that.
Yeah. So it's, I'm not sure that this works globally, so I don't want to speak as this is going to be everyone's experience. But here, I do think refugees come through the government. So they're coming regardless of, it's not like they can't come until they have a sponsor. They come because they've been chosen to come and they've been vetted and they go through the process and they come. So the awesome thing is, or the difficult thing is, I guess, if you don't have a sponsor, you're just working with an agency who gives you a caseworker and probably has a big caseload and they're doing the best they can. But having gone through this for the last 6 months, I can't fathom how a family, especially a big family, our family is a family of 7. So there's a lot of them, how they would navigate this country without having someone to hold their hand through it. It's very overwhelming. Our family, when they came here, had never been in a car. The kids were all born on the refugee camp. Our father in the family had been in the refugee camp for 17 years and all the children had been born there. So they've never known life outside of their camp in Tanzania. So it was extremely overwhelming to then get picked up, given 3 plane rides. They landed at about 11 o'clock at night. One of the best things that you can do, even if you don't want to sponsor a refugee family, is if you can get connected with a local organization, is they love to have huge groups of people welcome them at the airport. So that was the first thing that we did, was we just got tons of balloons. We looked up welcome in Swahili. We made signs, and we just were there with a huge group of people to say, we're so happy that you're here. And they were, of course, completely shell-shocked. Just terrified. But it was awesome because there's a strong population here now of people from the DR Congo where our family's from. They have connections and they somehow through their network hear of a family coming. So they also had a huge group of people at the airport who spoke Swahili. And so on our end, you can kind of choose how involved you want to be. It's definitely not a paid thing. It's not like a compassion sponsorship. We don't put up any money, although we obviously help them out from time to time financially, but the goal is independent. So, you have to reach that balance of helping them, but not doing for them, which is extremely hard, I think, for American Christians to not just fix it or to not just, want to give them everything. And we have done that wrong in some respects. We've overdone some respects. And we had to really learn, like, to say no and to not, our caseworker told us one of the first weeks, she said, the biggest problem I see in sponsor families is that they want to create middle-class Americans, and that's not what we're doing. We're just helping them make it on their own. And so we furnish their apartment, but the need to not give them 35 outfits and 17 toys and 100 books. Like, that's just how we do things here. And they don't need all that. And what we found very early is, if we gave them things, they didn't want to give them back because they finally had things. And so actually a very sobering story is when they came off the airplane, they each had plastic garbage bags with all the garbage that they'd accumulated from food along the trip. And we kind of realized that was like one of the things that they owned now. And they just don't part with things because, they're getting better, but they just don't part with things because they have so few possessions. So yeah, we did things like furnish their apartments, grocery shopping. I spent several days on the system. I had actually never done before, but I volunteered to do it because I'd lived in a big city before. So knew public transportation, but I'd never taken it in Grand Rapids, so that was really fun. We helped them with budgeting, help their kids navigate the beginning of the school year, popping into school. We go to their parent-teacher conferences with them, help them get uniforms, help them know how to open a bill, use a mailbox. The first night they came, it was like, we have hot water. Here's how it works. Here's how a shower works. Here's what a toilet is. Here's a stove. And some of those things they're going to classes and learning through their organization, but it's very different when you have someone kind of helping you do it. We just kind of do whatever they need, but you can choose how much you want to be involved in and how little.
So is this something where you guys have said, we will check in with you once a week? Do you just give them your cell phone and they call when they have questions? Like, do you have something structured or is it more open? How does that work?
Yeah, in the beginning, it's like all the time. There was 4 of us and we would just try and go every day. Someone would try and pop in because in the beginning, there's just so much. The goal at Bethany, and I'm assuming this is the way it is everywhere, is that kind of the government and the agency help them for 6 months. At 6 months, they're done, which is insane because it's just crazy how much they have to learn in 6 months. So now their 6 months hit in March. We had a huge party. We invited everyone who'd ever donated anything to them, their friends they'd made here, their caseworker, their translator at work, all sorts of people. We just had a big party. So, you made it. Now I would say once a week, someone probably stops by, and that's not out of necessity. That's just because like 6 months, your role kind of shifts from to a friend. And so now it's just like you would check in on a friend who might need you, or they'll text. He'll usually text if he has a question about a bill, or like today, our family went on an Easter hunt, and I just invited them all to come because they'd never experienced that before. And so I went. They don't drive, so I went and picked them up. And then usually when I drop them off, I say, okay, is there anything I need to know? Are there any bills I need to see? But we're really trying to back off as much as we can because they need to be independent, and things that I would never dream they could accomplish in 6 months. It's just what they've accomplished in their life so far. As refugees, they're so brave and so determined that it's amazing.
This reminds me so much. I think it's interesting that you brought up the foster care because, we have adopted, and I was so surprised when we first adopted just how much just normal everyday life things you really were sharing. I don't know what I expected, but there was just some general, this is how your life works sort of things that were missing. You get up at a certain time, these are the types of things you eat for breakfast. We go to a bed at a certain time. It's just like regular, ordinary things. So I think it's so interesting how that ties to refugees, how it's almost like, and I'm sure they're very capable, smart people, but like it's almost like a child, like you're teaching them how to live. In the beginning,
absolutely. And you also realize very quickly how silly a lot of things are in America. Like I remember taking them shopping for the first time and looking at 45 different kinds of toothpaste and being like, this is the dumbest thing. Why do we need 45 different kinds of toothpaste? Like, we just want fresh teeth. But even like basic hygiene and, there's just so much that's foreign. Or we had all these backpacks donated for them when we found out they were starting school. And so I just dropped off all the backpacks. And then the first day of school is coming and it's the night before. And I'm like, these are the uniforms and these are how. And I noticed that they'd given the 15-year-old a SpongeBob backpack. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is not a backpack for her. And he was like, well, what does it matter? And I'm like, it doesn't, but it does. Like, the father is just always laughs. Like, okay, whatever. And he'll just say like, silly. And I'm like, it is so silly, but it's just the way that things work. And so it's just funny when you realize how many things that we do in America that are ridiculous. And you come to look at your own culture. And I mean, there's many times where I look at my own culture and go, we have so much. It's insane. Like, it's just ridiculous how much stuff we think that we need. And then you look at them and what they have and how happy they are with the minimal basic things. You think we're doing something very wrong.
I'm curious, how has this impacted your kids?
I think they have not been quite as involved as I think all 4 moms would say. Our kids haven't been quite as involved as we would like them to be, just because life is busy. And so most of the stuff we do for them is during the day when our kids and their kids are at school. Our families both work the night shift, and so they're free during the day. And so that's usually when we go help them do stuff. But what I will say it's done is the very first time that we all got together, my kids were so nervous because they didn't speak English, and what are we going to do and how are we going to interact with them? And it was just really cool to see a soccer ball come out and like that be a universal language, or a jump rope, or just, sharing food. There's just so many ways that they can connect. I think it's made them understand the world is smaller than they think it is. And I think it's made them understand that there are people who live very, very, very different lives than they do. We've done some mission work, so they kind of understand that. But just, it's funny. We had a refugee come and talk to this service group at school, and the kids were asking questions like, do you have a cell phone? What do you do? Like, the girl was talking about not being able to go to school. I think she was Afghani. And she was saying like, girls can't go to school. And they were like, oh, so do you just sit at home all day and watch TV and play on your iPad? And she's like, no, like this, they have there's no reference in their life for my country is war torn. We have no home. We have to live in a camp. We have no food. There's no framework for that. So to continue to explain to them that happens. And so I think it's made them more empathetic to, that kind of thing. And my older kids, my middle schooler especially, like, you don't want to get into a political discussion with her about this because she's got some feelings, she's not just going to toe the party line on it.
So I'm wondering, now that you've been down in the trenches with this, I'm just curious, like, what's your outlook about refugees being in America, and what about more coming? Like and I don't want to get too political, although I do want to kind of get political.
Well, I think the first thing is I've kind of already said, but I think I would love for everyone to really look and educate themselves on what it means to come over here. I think when the refugee ban happened, I just saw so many people on social media being like, well, this is good because they're coming to harm us. And there's just so many easier ways to get in this country. Refugee is not the way that you would do that. It takes forever and it's very challenging, and it's just so random that if you wanted to do harm, there's just easier ways to do that. I think Europe is a little bit different because it's the land connection there, but in terms of coming to America, it's just very challenging. But I just think I look at what their work ethic is, and they have so much pride in America. Every time I'm with them, the dad will point out American flags to me, and he talks about his country, and he's so proud that where he works, there's a big flag out in front. He's so proud of that. He even has bought magazines with Trump on the cover because he says, I need to learn more about him. This is my country. This is my president. He has so much pride about being here. And so I've asked him many times, what he misses, and And he just looks at me like I'm crazy. He's like, I miss nothing. This is my home and this is so much better. I think they've just gone through I think I will never know the full stories of the horrors that they have been through in their life. No matter how many times I ask about your life back home, I just think I will never understand completely everything that a dad and mom with 5 kids trying to make it in a camp, what that looks like. So their determination to make it here is just, they're so brave. And the kids too, going to a school, not speaking a language, they're getting great grades. They're just doing so well. And so I think what an asset, to our country to have that, to have people who are, he for the first several months, it takes so long for all their paperwork to get through for them to even start looking for a job, which the organization helps with. But he would tell me almost every day, like, I need to work. Like, I don't want to just sit here, and I don't want to just, and they get government help. And he's like, I don't want that. I want to work. I want to own a house someday. I want to have a car someday. I want my kids to go to college. So, I just think that's nothing more than an asset for us, as a country, to have people who are that proud of being here and want to be here that much and are working so hard to make it work here. I can't think of a downside of that. I also think it's so, I've been to church they go to a church, that's kind of made up of refugees from DR Congo. Their pastor is a refugee from DR Congo. They're in Swahili, services in Swahili. I worship with them. It's just amazing to know that we're worshiping the same God in a totally different language. And they are so welcoming of me coming into their church, their 3-hour African church service. It's crazy. But anyway, I think it's such an asset for our country. And I think for me personally, it's just another reminder that when the Good Samaritan story happens and Jesus asks, who's our neighbor? Like, our neighbor isn't just the person that looks like us and lives down the street, especially now that we're all connected. And I think the internet and social media has made the world so much smaller, and we have to recognize that these are God's children. And I think it's so important for us to do whatever we can to get them out of these hellish situations that if I was a parent in them, I would do everything I could to get my kids to a better place. I mean, that's what we do as parents. We do everything we can to give our kids a better life than the one they had, before them. So I think whatever we can do as churches and Christians to do that, I think is a good thing.
So what do you see? I'm just thinking for people that might be listening that want to get involved, like, what do you think theoretically, ideally would be involvement from Christians? Is it a church, like churches sponsoring them, individual families, working with agencies? I know none of it's bad, but like, what would you love to see happen?
Yeah, I would love to see more churches step up and be a voice, whether or not they participate directly or not. Like, I just feel like we need more voices from the Christian world saying, this is a biblical issue. This is not a political issue. This is a biblical issue. Like, I just firmly believe that it is. I feel like it's what God calls us to when he asks us to look out for, widows and orphans and the oppressed. I think there's a clear call to me, that refugees fall under that. I think churches sponsoring is awesome. You have so many more resources, and you can pool those resources better when it's a bigger group of people. That being said, what we've found in just bringing 4 women together, 4 moms together, is, first of all, moms know how to get stuff done, right?
Right.
Totally awesome at, like, making sure nothing falls through the cracks. That's what we do for a living. But it is a lot of work in the beginning. And again, I think we took on the max that they probably require because we're like 4 type A women. But I think the cool thing about doing it in a small group is that it wasn't spread out over a ton of people. So we got really invested. And he calls, I keep referring to the dad because he speaks the most English. He came over with English, so he's who we communicate with the most. The mom is awesome, but she just speaks so little English that unless he's there to translate, it's hard to have a conversation with her. So I'm sorry that I keep saying he, like there's more people in the family. But anyway, he calls us his sisters, and he firmly believes that we're part of his family, and I love that. And I actually know someone from our church that's a small group that's done it. I know someone from our church that's done it as an individual person. Now, her family was smaller. It was just a man and a wife and I think 1 child. The bigger the family is, more logistically that there is to do. But I would just love to see churches care about this issue. I think I would just love to see more voices saying, hey, this matters to God. And so because it matters to God, it should matter to us. So whether that's, praying more, there was tons of families who contacted me and said, hey, I can't sponsor a family. Like I can't possibly take that on, but what can I do? And I would just be like, you know what? They could use a bus pass. They could use a Meijer gift card. They could use a grocery store. They could use, we need bunk beds. Does anybody have any? And people just came out of the woodwork with winter coats and donated uniforms. And so even if you can't if you're like, that is just, there's no way I can take that on in my life right now. I got too much going on. I can't sponsor. Find people that are, or find the organization that is and say, how can I care about this without completely jumping in? And there is so much that you can do from the sidelines without completely immersing yourself in it.
I'm glad you answered that. I was going to ask, what does that look like? What are the options to look at? But it sounds like we can support. It just reminds me so much of adoption and foster care. There's some families that can adopt, there's some families that can foster, and there's some people that can, support, bring relief and pray. And so I think it's a very similar sort of setup. Although, with the refugees, you're very quickly, releasing them to independence that's the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for us, I think foster care, was too much for us, in all honesty. It kind of was more than, our family felt like we could handle. And so this was like, okay, I remember tell my husband that I was kind of interested in it. And he was like, I feel like that I could handle. And so it's not so like they're in your house and, you're raising them, but in a lot of ways you still are doing a lot of raising. But it's a different thing. But yeah, there's so many things that, and even it's funny because my mom, was like, what can I do? And she ended up, going to another organization that does literacy and English classes, and most of their clients are refugees. And so she ended up getting trained as a ESL tutor. There's so many different ways that you can, there's a church down the street from me that does amazing ESL classes and provides childcare and does all this stuff, that, the people in that church aren't necessarily sponsoring refugees or doing all the work that we're doing. But my goodness, English classes is the biggest thing they need when they start out there, because if you don't speak the language, you can't work, you can't go to school, So even just finding a church that has ESL, and maybe you just want to love on babies. And so you say, hey, I'll watch kids during ESL. There's so many different ways that you can still help serve refugees without being in the trenches, as you said before.
I'm just even thinking about, as you're talking about the ESL classes, just how much learning a language, and that's just overwhelming. I'm just sitting here thinking about, moving to another country, not knowing the language and having to figure that out, and they want me to, be independent in 6 months. Like,
yeah, and it's really, it's funny because we would always be like, oh, they can't do that. Like someone would, like, we'd know that was the next step they needed to do, and we'd be like, they can't do that. And our Bethany always had to be like, you'd be amazed at what they can do. Like, we want to hold their hands so much longer than they need it, because we're so living in a place of, well, how could they possibly do that? Their high schooler has to take a city bus every day, and she spoke zero English and has to get on it at 7 a.m. in the morning. And I kept thinking, she can't do that. She's 15. Like, that's not safe. That's not whatever. And then I'm thinking, well, what did she do at the camp? I'm sure she walked miles in the, jungle for wood for the fire, and nobody thought twice about it. Their kids are what their kids do in terms of housework and cooking, and it's just very different than what we expect of our kids. And so, well, they can't, but it's really just our own Americanized. So you have to take that off a lot and go, nope, they're resourceful. They'll figure it out. And they just get it done.
I think that's such a callback to what you were talking about, just how much of an asset to our country that actually is. For our kids to be raised around kids like that are so independent, to have friends like that, to be around other adults that are so, independent and self-motivated and proud of our country, and definitely sounds like an asset to our country.
Yeah. And I just think we need a lot of reminders in America. Christianity I mean, I just think it's a lot of times it comes really easy, and that we call things persecution that are just inconveniences, and we call things hard that are inconveniences. And so I think for me, it's been like a weekly, at least, gut check of like, God didn't promise us a life of like safety and convenience and ease, even though somehow the American gospel has gotten that twisted a little bit, I think. And so it just reminds me what true faith is. I remember at Christmas time us being like, oh, well, we got to get them all the presents and all this. And then I asked him, well, how did you celebrate Christmas? Do you do gifts? How does it work in Africa? And he said, well, in Africa, yes, there are people who do gifts and big celebrations for the poor. So we would all pull our food together and we would have a big dinner and we would celebrate and we would pray and sing and dance. And I thought, no, we're the ones who have this wrong, not you. That sounds exactly what you should do. We are piling our trees full of ridiculous amounts of things and eating ridiculous amounts of food and calling that celebrating. So a lot of times they just remind me of the simplicity of it all. And that's really a good thing for me. It's a good reminder for me. I struggle with contentment a lot. And so it reminds me like, no, you need to remember what this is really about.
That's so good. Well, Jill, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this. It's really been good for me. I haven't worked with anybody or even talked with anybody who has worked with refugees. So it's been very enlightening for me. And I know people that are listening, it's going to be the same. So I would love, is there a way that people can, if they have more questions about this and want to contact you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, without my blog anymore, I'm kind of a little bit harder to track down on social media, but I still am on Twitter from time to time, so you can tweet me at justjillyblog. Otherwise, I will give you my email, and you can put that in the show notes, and people can reach out to me if they have any.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, thanks again so much, Jill.
Thank you. Good to catch up.
Well, guys, I hope hearing Jill's story might have stirred up something as you listened. Maybe you've been skeptical and confused about refugees like me at times. I hope that might have calmed some of your fears of what it looks like to care for refugees. And for those of you whose hearts were already for and with refugees, I hope this gave you a really practical example of one way you can get involved. And Jill gave some great ideas of all kinds of different ways that we can get involved. I do have Bethany Christian Services linked in the show notes if you want to find out more about your area from them. And really, I just hope we all, as we listen, are reminded of how truly blessed we are to live in this country. I mean, even with all of its faults, there is so much good. And I hope this episode reminds you of all we have to offer and share with those in need who are in a very vulnerable position in their lives, and that we really are called to serve those in need around us. So guys, I hope that encouraged you and challenged you. And before we go, I wanted to remind you one more time about the Bible study, abidingministries.net/OBS. And with that, I think that wraps up this week, and we will see you next week on Feathers.